Get started here. This is Unit 11, Populism. I want you to make sure you circle that word populism, because if you'll remember back to Alexis de Tocqueville, man who came over from France in the 1830s, one of the things he noticed about America was that we were populist, or the rise of the common man. So populism is going back to that rise of the common man. So let's go ahead and get this started. Make sure you are taking, you are pausing, and you are writing down, and you're listening, you're annotating, and we'll get through this unit pretty quickly. Now, the first thing I have here actually isn't on your notes at all. It's just a picture. I might ask you about it on a quiz. So I need you to kind of listen just for a second. American Gothic, and I might write that at the top of my notes, is the title of this, I say picture, portrait. And the question here is how does this artwork portray farmers? If you look at them, happy, sad, what do you think? Rich, poor, prosperous? How? How does this picture portray the average American farmer? Almost a dead look in their eyes, and if you look in the background, that's their house, although it kind of looks like a church, does it not? Definitely shows farmers in a different light. This is from the populist era. Populism, by definition, again, I'm going to tell you, the rise of the common man is what we're looking at, okay, is a farmer's revolt against big business. I have a really, really famous quote here, and I love this quote, because if you can understand this quote and you can apply it to this chapter, it makes a lot of sense. And it's by a woman named Mary Elizabeth Lease, a populist organizer, and in 1890, she made a speech, and what she said is what you farmers need to do is raise less corn and more hell. I want you guys to make sure you get that down. Circle it, star it, whatever you need to do, but think about that all throughout these notes. What you farmers need to do is raise less corn and more hell. Okay, it's kind of interesting. We're actually going to read a speech in class by her, so you'll want to remember Miss Mary Elizabeth. Now, this is the very first slide. Pause it, get it down. Now, with it, the populist movement and the farmers' revolt, by the late 1800s, hardship had replaced the prosperity that farm families enjoyed after the Civil War. Now, after the Civil War, we are going to have a very, very, very prosperous time. You're going to have industrialization. You're going to have the reaper. You're going to have all kinds of stuff going on. You're going to have steel plows and the transcontinental railroad. So that's going to be super important. So they made quite a bit of money after the Civil War. American farmers now, though, at the late 1800s, are facing hard times, because here's a problem, and here's the key word to this entire chapter. They are overproducing. Overproducing. Circle that word, overproducing. One of the main reasons why, and I want you to put an arrow out beside it, is the fact that they are mechanizing their farms. And when you mechanize, you make more. But they didn't follow the ideals of supply and demand down here at the bottom. Because when supply goes up, value goes down. I want you to think about that, okay? Supply goes up, value goes down. I might even write that out beside it. And that is the root problem of the populace, which makes sense when you think about Mary Elizabeth's quote, what you farmers need to do is raise less corn and more hell. Now, populism by definition, last slide on the first page. A political movement, I want you to circle the political part of it, that tried to help out the nation's struggling farmers. So with that, they are going to organize politically. They are going to lobby the government, political. And that's what the Populist Party is going to be all about. The rise of the common man, and for that, that means the farmers, okay? Now, if you flip and you go to the next page with me, you're going to notice that what we're going to do is we're going to talk about, and at the top of this page, you might want to put 5 reasons for farmers' trouble, okay? And we're going to talk about the 5 reasons the farmers are in trouble and why they need to raise hell. The first thing, I think I just talked about it, did I not? I talked about mechanization. More machines. Now with that, more machines equals more production. I talked about that. But are those machines free? No. So they put the farmers more into debt. Now here's where you have to listen to me very carefully. So if you are listening, listen carefully. More machines equals more debt, but more machines also means more production. If you produce more, supply goes up, value goes down. It's an inverse relationship. So with that, if you're going into debt to produce more and then your crop doesn't get as high as a price, you're in debt and you have no way to pay it off. Mechanization, industrialization, it sounds great, but if you're overproducing too much, you're going to run yourself into the ground. And if you have machines, number 2 problem, you have to have more land to farm. But guess what? Land costs money. And all of these farmers are buying the land, but they buy it on, highlight, credit. And that means they go into the dirtiest 4-letter word there is, debt. That might be a good question on the quiz. What's the dirtiest 4-letter word? I might have you spell that one out. You better put D-E-B-T. All right. Problem number 3, the specialization of crops. And problem number 4, disasters. So pause this, get it down. Now, the specialization of crops, that is actually, you would think, extremely smart, because this means that a farmer and his farm is going to only raise one crop. They're going to do it well, and they're going to do it so well that that's where they're going to get all of their money from. But what happens if you put all your eggs, as somebody might say, especially my grandpa, old school, in one basket, and then you drop the basket? If you specialize in crops and that crop has trouble, then you have a major problem, because now you're in debt from farmland, from machines, and you can't sell very much because of overproduction. Then one year you take and your crop dies, but nobody else's does, so it still doesn't even get a lot of money. And all of a sudden, you have no money whatsoever. One thing that's really hard to understand is that now that we are in a more modern society, you have to remember that farmers get paid once a year, their harvest time. And if they don't get paid, that's an entire year without money. You and I, we don't go to work for 2 or 3 days, we get docked for 2 or 3 days. A farmer, his crop doesn't do well, he doesn't get a year's worth of money. Problem number 4, disasters, floods, boll weevils, grasshoppers. Anything like this is going to completely wipe out crops, and it's very, very prevalent back then. So something to think about there. And then the final problem, and this is the big one, okay? In fact, I think you may need to skip a slide in your notes. Yep, it's on the next page, the top, is corporate greed. Pause it, get it down. Now, what word are you writing over and over and over again, and I've put it in red? Trust, trust, trust. Circle them. Then remind me out beside that. What is a trust? Remind me. It's a monopoly. Then I want you to put in equal signs. What do monopolies do to prices? They rise them up. So with that, the populist last problem, and I'm going to be honest with you, this is the biggest problem. You might want to go ahead and write that out beside the slide. Biggest problem for the farmers is the fact that as monopolies grow, so do prices. So the barbed wire gets more expensive. The fertilizer gets more expensive. And the one you have to circle, underline, exclamation point, star, whatever you want, the number one enemy of the farmer, the average populist man, the common man, is the railroad trust. This would be the Vanderbilt one, okay? And as we start to see monopolies in railroad, you are going to see railroad shipping rates go up, and the little farmer can't handle it, okay? Because Vanderbilt takes and he makes a deal with Rockefeller, and then he gives Rockefeller the cheap rate, but he charges the farmer more to make up for his deal with Rockefeller. So farmers are in trouble because these monopolies are starting to literally monopolize their money. This cartoon is awesome. In fact, this might be a good quiz cartoon. You'll notice that the farmer's back here in the back with his little son, okay? And they're watching the horse eat all of the crops. Look at the faces on the face on the horse. And of course, the horse isn't supposed to be just any horse. It's an iron horse, also known as the railroad monopoly. And he's eating up the farmer's profits. So down at the bottom it says the iron horse which eats up the farmer's produce, 1873. Now going back to the slide, I kind of just put it in a little bit of the wrong order. But if you go back to that last slide, the price index, consumer price index, this is, you ready to write? This is the average price for a good that someone pays, okay, that the farmer gets for his produce that he's also selling it for. Now you'll notice this chart starts in 1865, end of the Civil War. Down there at the bottom, put end of Civil War. Goes all the way to 1910, right before actually World War I. You'll notice that the blue right up here says the farmers receive better prices for their products than they pay. So they're actually turning a profit, yes? So all right here after the Civil War, you notice they're making a profit. You notice, though, the profit's getting larger or smaller? Smaller. And then you notice, towards the end of the century especially, you go into the red, which means farmers pay more for their purchases than they receive for their products. That means they're going into, down here at the bottom of the box, right, the dirtiest four-letter word there is, I might check for it, debt. And that's a problem. This is because they had to pay for machines, for new farmland. They overproduce. Supply goes up, value goes down, and now the farmer is in debt. Pause it, get it down. Now, this slide right here, next page, the first thing I want you to do is massive circle around the thing called the Grange. And then put an arrow down here to where it says Farmers Union, founded by Oliver Kelly. Now, what I want you to understand about this is a cooperative movement, and that's what you wrote down. Cooperative means together. So if you want to circle the word cooperative, put together out beside it. That means farmers are working together. That's why it's a farmers union. Labor unions were when laborers worked together, Gompers, the AFL, etc. But the cooperative movement of the Grange, that kind of just sounds farmerish, right? Grange, is where farmers pooled their money together to make the shared purchase of machinery, supplies, insurance, anything like that. So the farmers started to get really smart, and what they did is they said, I've got 4 farmers in the Panhandle. What we're going to do is we're going to buy one machine. I'll use it the first week. You use it the second week. You use it the third week. They start to pool their money, and they start to do things a little bit smarter. But the foundational problem is still there. They are raising too much crops. Remember, Mary Elizabeth, what you need to do is raise less corn and raise more hay because they're overproducing. Now, some things as they kind of group up together politically is they're going to lobby for pro-farmer laws. Lobby means they go to the government and say, hey, we want this. So the one thing we're going to see them do is they're going to ask for something called the Interstate Commerce Act, and that's going to regulate the rates of railroads, saying that Vanderbilt can't charge them more and Rockefeller less. Now, this is going to be the last slide, I think, of this one, okay? First law to regulate big business is going to be asked for by the farmers. Now, pause this, get it down. It's a little bit of a bigger slide. Massively important. Now, because the populist movement kind of starts to rise up, I'll be honest with you, they're not as successful on paper as they are really in reality, because they're going to start the ball rolling. The first thing they're going to do, I already mentioned it, is they're going to lobby for the Interstate Commerce Act, which will turn into what we call the Interstate Commerce Commission of 1887. This is literally a law that says that interstate commerce, now here's a vocab word for you, out beside or below this slide I want you to write. Commerce equals, anybody know? Business. So if I'm enacting in commerce, interstate commerce, that's business from state to state. So what this law is saying is the federal government has the ability to regulate all aspects of interstate commerce. There's another vocab word, regulate. That means make up a rule. They also say that rebates and drawbacks are illegal, so basically saying that Vanderbilt can't make that deal with Rockefeller and then screw over the little farmer. Here's the phrase I want you to write out beside this, right over here to the right. All fares must be fair and reasonable. All prices or fares must be fair and reasonable. I want you to circle fair and reasonable. That is probably going to be on your quiz. They have to be fair and reasonable. You can't charge the little farmer $10 and charge the big business that you made a deal with $2. Now, the last one here is the Sherman Antitrust Act, and that one's 1890. And I'm going to be honest with you, this one's easy to remember. Antitrust prohibits monopolies. Basically saying monopolies aren't legal. However, I do want you to make a note out beside this one. Was not as effective as intended. Was not as effective as intended. Although, is it a good thing that we have this symbol that we're starting to make laws against trust. I think the Sherman antitrust is more of a symbol, but still antitrust, anti-monopoly. Good start. Yes? All right, tune in for video 2. Won't be that long.